The America's Cup is almost upon us, and the action gets underway with a 4-day warm-up event beginning at around 2 a.m. The coverage on UK time on Sky Sports this Thursday morning. And from the footage we've already seen coming in from New Zealand, there's every reason to be excited about the kind of racing that we're in store for. Let's take a little bit more of an in-depth, detailed look at that now. We're joined by two-time Olympian sailor in the 2008 Beijing Olympics and 2012 London Olympics. He's also been a world champion and now a current Team GB sailing coach. Stevie Morrison, you must be excited about some of the footage that we've already seen coming in, not least, of course, because in this edition of the America's Cup, it's a completely new class of vessel that they're competing in, the AC-75 class. What are your first impressions?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's absolutely spectacular. The America's Cup is just an absolutely unique trophy. I think any trophy that's been around and people have wanted to win for 170 years is an amazing sporting event. And, you know, obviously, there's a lot of history. It was started off in Great Britain, and we've gone from 100-foot old, you know, very old-fashioned boats to these incredible machines now that when just two and a half years ago the design was announced, it was fairly hard to believe it would actually work, and now these guys are sailing them around at speeds of over sort of 75 kilometers an hour, 100 kilometers an hour even, and yeah, just up 75 foot of boat, 7 tons worth of boat is hanging on a bit of carbon fiber that's about 4 meters wide, so just breathtaking, really.
Yeah, they really are incredible pictures. To see such big vessels out of the water, and foiling is the buzzword, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, foiling is new. I mean, it effectively works very much like an aeroplane wing. It's just a wing that's in the water. As the boat gathers enough speed, you manage to get lift off that wing, lift the whole boat up, and then yeah, if you think of trying to drag a big car through the water or just drag a small little wheel through the water, you'd obviously rather drag the smaller item. And as you reduce the drag, you increase the speed, and these boats just will go faster and faster because of that. So it's really new technology. It was around in the last America's Cup in Bermuda, but now they've taken it to the next level, and these boats they almost look like insects, but really, really big insects.
Yeah, the technical side as well, the computers and so on board. How much of a role does that now play, and does it diminish from the role of the crew as the technology gets ever better?
The America's Cup has always been about a technology race, design, technology, and pushing the limits of sailing. That's where we are now. The guys are designing and developing the boat. They're pushing that development on at the moment. But once we get to the Christmas Cup that starts on Thursday morning, and then as we move ahead into next year and the qualification for the America's Cup itself, it's very much a sporting sailing contest, and that competitive edge, that fighting spirit, and being able to read the wave, control or not control your opponent will come to the fore. So whilst at the moment we're seeing that design side, and that's where the team's focus has been for the last 2 years, it's now time to get out of that and get into racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that tech on board in mind as well, how does the role of the crew change as you adapt to what you have available?
Well, certainly when I started sailing, there was never a flight controller. That is for sure. You've still got a helmsman, who might be called a helmsman or a skipper. That's effectively the captain of the boat. So you're steering the boat primarily, but you're also very responsible for the safety and of everyone on board. That takes a massive precedent should it get windy and dangerous. And then they have sail trimmers. So the sails are effectively big wings up above the water. And these sails look very much like a boat you'd see, down on the seafront if you live near the coast or some inland lakes. Depending on where you live in Great Britain, there's always plenty of sailing boats to be seen, and you need a sail controller. But now, yeah, you need someone flying the boat. So that's someone that controls the foil in the water, and they decide how high you're going to fly the boat. And the higher you fly the boat, the faster you go, but the more risk you take when you do that. So those roles are quite set in stone. And then the other places on the team, you have the grinders, and these are the big guys. They're the muscle. So there we've got an Olympic rower on the British INEOS Team UK, Matt Gottrell. He won a gold medal in 2016. I know that the Kiwi team has a kayaker who was a medalist in the kayak event. So you got some proper athletes turning the grinding pedestal. So that, again, fairly traditional roles on a sailing boat, really.
You also, right at the top here, talked about the sheer speed as well as the size of these boats. It strikes me this has all the ingredients to be perhaps one of the most dramatic competitions we've witnessed in the 170 years or so of the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only difference it really makes, they've still got to make the same decisions, but their reaction time is just dropped right down. So they're still racing the wind, they're still racing a course and against one other boat, which is known in sailing as a match race. So it doesn't matter if you win by 3 minutes or 3 seconds, you still win. That's all you've got to do is beat your opponent. So the tactics will come into play on that, but the decision time they have to make those decisions has been brought right down. So whereas a race might take 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and things would play out, either very slowly for the positive or very slowly for the negative if you're behind. Nowadays, things are changing really, really quickly, and one small mistake will be punished exponentially hard compared to how it used to be in the old days.
Now, of course, Emirates Team New Zealand are the current holders, having won in Bermuda back in 2016. As defending champions, they get to set the rules for this edition of the America's Cup, and it'll be the only time we see them go against the 3 challengers as well. So how much do we expect them to show us? How much do we expect them to give away to their rivals in this 4-day event?
I think because of the COVID situation we've had this year, it's really hard. It'd be very easy to say, oh, the teams are going to be hiding and keeping their powder dry. You know, sandbagging is the sort of current word that seems to be doing the rounds on the internet. But I just don't see that the teams can afford that. And as much as anything else, the 4 guys you've got helming these boats, the 4 skippers, you know, they're not devoid of ego, and they're also they're also not used to losing. So, and they won't want to lose. So you can say they're going to sandbag or play it down as much as you want, but it's a real opportunity to find the weaknesses, find the strengths of your opponent, and when you know either, a bit like boxing. I mean, these boats are like heavyweight boxers. They don't get to see each other very often. Normally, they don't get to spar in boxing, or you wouldn't spar against your main opponent. And this is effectively a little spar. So it's a chance to give a few jabs, give a few punches, see some weaknesses, see some strengths, and they'll be able to learn those lessons. And if they don't push, then I don't believe they'll properly learn. So for the Kiwis, I think they've got to go at it a little bit. And all the other teams, it's a great opportunity to sort of sharpen their teeth ahead of the Prada Cup.
Yeah, it's a fine balancing act, isn't it? But it would seem on the surface that if you're able to set the rules, then you should be able to weight the competition in your favour. Exactly how much of an advantage is it in reality, though, for Team New Zealand?
I think it's not huge, but it's significant. That they will have ultimately seen the design first, so they'll have, as they're building the rule, they'll see strengths and weaknesses inside that rule, and they'll know in a finer detail. If you've written something down, you'll see the nuance in it, perhaps a little more than someone else. They're on home turf, which I think is quite a big advantage in a sailing event. Different to Formula One or different to a running race where ultimately it's a 100-meter long track wherever you are in the world. There's not a significant gain or loss to be had. Whereas here, the wind is affected by shorelines, by buildings, by water, by there's tidal currents, and the Kiwi crew have grown up there, so their sort of twitch reflexes to when they see something happen will be a little bit better. But other than that, you still need a very, very strong team, and probably the Kiwis' biggest strength comes from the fact they've been a team longer than the other 3 teams. So they've got that infrastructure, much like a big business that's used to delivering America's Cup dates for races.
Yeah, and after we've got this World Series event out of the way, the 3 challengers then, of course, go on to head-to-head competition beginning on January the 15th, the Prada Cup, with the winner going on to meet the defender in March in the America's Cup proper itself. Let's take a closer look at those teams, starting with the Italians and Luna Rossa. I'm sure you've seen and read some of the same things that I have, and I know that the Italian vessel has been described as the sleekest of the 4 competing.
Well, yeah, I think probably no surprise that if you're from a fashion house, you end up with the best looking boat. That is for sure. But the Italians are what's known as the challenger of record. So they were the first people to challenge the Kiwis, and so they're involved with the design. So as opposed to INEOS Team UK and American Magic, they had a sight of the rule a little bit earlier, along with the Kiwi team. And yeah, their boat looks very good. They've got a really strong team. That they've got a very Italian-based team, but they've brought in a guy called Jimmy Spittle, who's known as the Pitbull, a very, very aggressive match racer. And he was actually the helmsman of Oracle Team USA in the last America's Cup and in 2013, where, of course, they came back from 8-1 behind against New Zealand. So his rivalry with Team New Zealand is, well, legendary in sailing world, and I think, you know, sports across the world, that was one of the biggest comebacks ever. And so I think it's quite a coup for Prada to get Jimmy on the boat in a role as one of their two helmsmen. You know, but yeah, very beautiful looking boat as well.
Moving on to our big hope, Team INEOS UK. I've seen it described as being the most similar in appearance, with a bulky physique to the Emirates Team New Zealand. It's led and skippered by 4-time Olympic champion Ben Ainslie. Of course, the UK, Britain's never won this competition in the history, going back to 1851 or so. How much pressure is on this team, and how much pressure is on Sir Ben Ainslie as well?
I think there's got to be a huge amount of pressure on the team and on Sir Ben. I mean, ultimately, you can be pretty confident if you give Ben a product equal to or even better than their opponents in terms of boat speed. And he's proven time and time again that he knows how to win with it, and he's ruthless competitor. Obviously, this is a bigger challenge than just Sir Ben Ainslie. You know, it is a whole team thing. It's a collaboration between sailors, between designers. But they've really got no excuse, in as much as they've got incredible backing from INEOS, and inside that they've, you know, been able to call on the experiences of Mercedes through the relationship of INEOS and the Mercedes Formula One team. So they, you know, everything's there. All the ingredients are in place, but of course, in Great Britain, we love a bit of the Great British Bake Off, and you know, as Mary Berry used to tell us, if you don't get all the ingredients quite right, it can end up with a soggy bottom, and that's what we desperately don't want for INEOS Team UK. Their boat is an aggressive design. I think that's a good sign, in as much as you don't win these things by being average. You need to be brave, but they've got a tough few months ahead of them to even make it to the America's Cup. There's definitely potential in the boat, but we've seen in training at the moment there's been a few glitches. You know, they're quite fast in a straight line, which is really, really encouraging. And at the moment they're finding the manoeuvring a little bit harder. So that's as we said, it's kind of the time in the program where we take it from the designers and we give it really to the sailors, and they work out how to use this beast. So you wouldn't want anyone other than Ben Ainslie in charge of that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because the boat wasn't in the water for the first 2 practice days. That obviously there's been things that they're working on, but equally we spoke to David Freddie Carr last week, part of the crew, and he said the week before they'd had a fantastic time out on the water. So how much scrutiny should we give the fact that they didn't put the boat in the water for those 2 practice days, and is it cause to be concerned?
I think you can't get away from the fact they clearly had a bit of a problem. I suppose the encouraging thing would be it wasn't anything major. It wasn't like they had a big crash and then they've had to go in. It was a little thing, and what you know, as pundits, as armchair fans and viewers, what we can see is we can see the boat, the sails and the foils, but we can't see what's inside. And inside those boats is, you know, 50 or 60% of the technological puzzle in itself, in that all the mechanisms that control the sails, control the foils, are under the hood, if you like. We don't get to see them. So my best guess is it was to do with, you know, a control system. So that's, you know, that's either a computer or a hydraulic thing. That's basically what powers these boats, is computer driven, you know, and batteries, or hydraulics, which is what the big grinder guys do. So it would have been a problem with that. I think you'd always rather have that problem now rather than in a few weeks' time. But yeah, at this stage of proceedings, you don't want to be missing days. That they won't be happy about that. That's without doubt. But equally, it's happened, and the best teams will take a lesson from it, will learn, and fundamentally will fix it. And they have been sailing again the last couple of days, so they've got the boat up and running again, and they'll be moving forward and looking forward to actually getting to race. You've got to remember, for most of these guys in the America's Cup, they're hardened racers, and they've spent the last 18 months just designing and building a boat. They haven't raced. So that's why I just think we could get fireworks in the next few days.
Well, and I wanted to pick you up on that as well, because given what you've just said about the stuff they'll have been looking at and the process over the last week, what do we really expect from Team INEOS then over these next 4 days, and what will they be wanting to get out of it?
I think what we'll expect is that they'll be probably not too combative, because I think, as I said there, if they've got a weakness at the moment, it's in their manoeuvring. So I think it gives them a great opportunity to directly compare that manoeuvring, the technique, how the sailors are operating, who's doing what on the other boats, and learn from that. It gives them a chance to check in on their speed, which I believe they seem to be quite confident with their speed as a whole. But by putting yourself in a course, and it has the boundaries, it has the marks, it kind of it gets rid of any training thoughts. It's like, right, we're here. And I think, so what we'll see from INEOS is a sharpening. I imagine we'll see an improvement. But I'd say of the teams, they're probably at this point the least race ready. But as we say, it's not about being race ready now. It's about being race ready on the 15th of January. The most important thing now is how fast you are, and how much potential's in the boat. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, their design had a lot of similar features to the Kiwi boat. The Kiwi boat's in training, and again, I'm very keen to mention it's only training at this point. The gloves aren't fully off. The Kiwi boats look really very competitive. So I think that's really positive news for us, is that the similarity, there are similarities, but they've got to do as good a job of eking the potential out of it as they can.
Let's look ahead then to the American Magic vessel. What do we expect from them, and how excited should we be by their entry this time around?
Well, I think from a British perspective, we should be a little bit excited, because we've got Paul Goodison is the mainsail trimmer, and of course he was a gold medalist from the Beijing Olympics for Team GB. So we've got a really strong British interest there. I think they look very well organised team, as much as you'd expect. They're very well backed, very well funded team, which sadly in all these top level sporting things, funding does have an effect and is a consideration. But they're very well funded, they're very well organised, and they were probably the first team to get a test boat up and running. They were the first team to get their first boat on the water. All the teams are allowed to build two. So you have a sort of initial testing one, and then the ones we're seeing now, which is, will be, you'd imagine, the race boats. And they were the first with their race boats. So they're very much on time. They're very much polished, and they've been working hard. So to me, they're probably my favourite, other than the Kiwis, for this next event. But we've got to hope they've got to somewhere near the top of their potential, and we'll be chasing them down hard.
Yeah, and as you say, they're backed by the historic New York Yacht Club, which will certainly help their cause, no doubt. Let's touch again on defending Emirates Team New Zealand as well. We mentioned that they get to set the rules, so in theory things should be weighted a little bit in their favour. Are they really that far ahead of the competition then? Because you pointed out that it's very much condensed. We lost 2 of the World Series events earlier this year. This is the only time these 4 teams are going to get to race against each other.
Yeah, and you've got to think that's a slight disadvantage for the Kiwi team, is they won't be as race hardened, they won't be as sharp. The positive they'll put on that is they've got a bit more time for development. We know they've got another set of the foils, so the part that the boat flies on are due to come in the next month, which you would assume would be a performance gain, or at least a different option. So in some ways you should say the Kiwis should be the least prepared at this point, because they don't need to race till March, whereas all the other teams need to be ready to race in January. But I think, within that, we have to remember what would it be? It would be the tight three, or the afterguard. But Pete Burling, Blair Tuke, and Glenn Ashby. I mean, that's a formidable lineup. And as much as we've got Seben, Pete and Blair have both got a gold and a silver, and they're only in their mid-20s. They won the last America's Cup, so they're every bit as formidable as the reputation has it. And how much of an advantage have they got? I don't know. I think there's an awful lot in the fact they've got a very well structured team. Their design and development programs tried and tested, whereas a lot of the other teams, it's new design teams, and so perhaps their advantage is more in the longevity and ethos of the team rather than just the fact they got to make the rules.
Yeah, and just from a competitive spirit standpoint that you touched upon there, the pride of these guys taking part as well. I am about to ask, there's only one World Series event. It's going to take place this week. Teams don't want to give too much away, but when that pride starts to come to the fore and the boats are in the water and you can see it's the whites of your competitors' eyes, is there more emphasis on this warm-up event than would usually be the case in the America's Cup?
I think so, because I think the teams would have a feel for each other if we'd had a normal year, rather than this new normal is that they've only really been able to guess. And you've got to, like I say, you've got to find out. All the teams have been saying they want to get stuck in. They want to push and test each other. As a sportsman, I never wanted to lose. I've played a lot of golf with Ben Ainsley. I've spent a lot of time with Pete and Blair, and these are guys that are used to winning whatever they do. Be that a pool match after sailing or around a golf or a sailing race, they're competitive animals, and there's no way you're reining them in.
So sum it up for us then, Stevie. What does the America's Cup mean, not just to those competing, but the fans that'll be watching on as well? How big an event is this going to be this time around?
Well, I mean, this is the first biggest sporting competition in the world. It's brought in many of the most successful, passionate people that desperately want to win it. It's often been seen as the Billionaires' Cup. It's the cutting edge of sailing, a cutting edge of technology, teamwork, and ultimately, combative sport. And I think this year that's going to happen at high speed, high intensity, and it's down in New Zealand. It's the home of, the Southern Hemisphere's home of yacht racing. And it's just the atmosphere, I think, will be quite incredible, especially after such a tough year that the whole world has had. So I think it's going to be just breathtaking.
It absolutely is. And we finally get to see these teams go head-to-head this week with the World Series event. It all gets underway, of course, as you can see every race from this edition, the 36th edition of the America's Cup, live on Sky Sports. The coverage of the warm-up event starting on Thursday gets underway at 2 a.m. on Sky Sports Mix and Sky Sports main event. If you can't quite hack it and stay up for the live coverage here on Sky, we do have replays at 9 a.m. and then a little bit later as well at 7 p.m. also on Sky Sports Mix. There'll be highlights available on demand as well. But Stevie, you've whetted the appetite. The America's Cup is upon us.
Thank you.